All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to jump into bootstrapping virtual production with Pratik Shah. This is a 15-minute one, so it's going to be good and fast and fabulous. All right, let's have a hand for Pratik. Sorry,
Pratik.
Pratik. That's what you get from a Schwartz, right? Okay.
Hey, everybody. I'm Pratik. I'm a filmmaker and a creative technologist. So I call myself a creative technologist with heavy emphasis on the creative. Like up until very recently, most of my jobs were either film, design, doing social media work. I've actually directed a feature film as well. Most of my creative background, or most of my professional background is creative work. As of the last couple of years, I've gotten more and more into interactive and immersive design and interactive projects. And so what I'm gonna go over is some of the lessons I've learned making that career transition. And then now what I do is actually designing AI workflows for companies to use. So a little bit more about what I've done. My way to sort of break into the tech side of this industry was through winning at hackathons. I've done interactive exhibits at some galleries, and a lot of my personal work is actually just like prototyping different like human AI and different human-computer interactions. Come on. Oh. So this is sort of the theme of this whole presentation. We're about to enter the age of generalist. If you are starting a project today and you don't have studio backing, or you're not beholden to follow the rules of production, you are going to probably benefit from completely rethinking your approach from the ground up. For those of us who are smaller creators, there's no real point in following the traditional pre-production, production, post-production workflow. Instead, we have to make sure that this is out of order. This is the workflow we should be using: ideation, execution, polish, and then distribution. Why do I say this instead of going through that traditional workflow? It's because when you are mixing immersive content with filmed content, what you really want to do is be able to go back and ideate and iterate over and over and over again. You only want to have your talent on stage for as little time as possible, because you don't really have the budget to afford actors for, however many shoot days you're planning. So instead, you can do as much as you can using tools like Unreal Engine, a lot of the tools I'm gonna go over in terms of AI, to actually build out and sketch out your idea ahead of time. And that way, when your talent comes on set, you're kind of just filling in the gaps where you need to. And so this is the big question. This is sort of that overarching theme that's hanging over all of us. It's like, how do we make sure we're not getting replaced by AI? And what skills do we need to develop in order to make sure that we don't get replaced? Storytellers are always going to be part of the process, and they're always going to be necessary. If you have that skill, you will be safe, but the nature of your job is going to change. We're going to go from more traditional set-in-stone roles to conducting. What these guys were able to accomplish in their day and age with the technological breakthroughs that they discovered as part of their process, we can now do with so much smaller, much smaller teams. Things that I would start learning if you are trying to figure out what to do next is these sort of node-based workflows. Pretty much like node-based workflows were the way I kind of started going from more film-oriented tools to tech-oriented tools. Show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with like DaVinci and color grading and using nodes? Okay, that's literally what kind of was the unlock in my brain to start learning Unreal Engine. A lot of people will tell you like, oh, you gotta learn C++, you gotta learn all this stuff. No, you just can jump into blueprints, and if you have a mental model of how these node-based workflows work in DaVinci and Nuke, you will be surprised at how quickly you pick up node-based workflows in all these other tools. Stable diffusion. We see a lot of the companies who are here are basically wrappers around either Stable Diffusion, OpenAI, Some of them are just like taking open source projects and turning them into products with a thin layer on top. The best way to use Stable Diffusion today is a program called Comfy UI. And what that lets you do, and this is a screenshot from Comfy, you design this whole node-based workflow, and then you get output what's called a JSON file. And that has the entire workflow in there. And then from that point on, you can automate the rest of the process, and you can actually scale up super quickly. So all these nodes do different things, and what you can do is mix and match models. That's where the real creativity with AI-generated work comes. Midjourney is awesome for like sketching out your ideas, like getting an idea of like kind of what you're getting at and seeing what the AI understands and what it doesn't understand. But really, if you want specific, repeatable results, which you need to scale up your projects, what you need to be using is Stable Diffusion, and using a tool like Comfy, or the other big alternative is Auto 1111. That's how you actually get those customized, specific results. As creatives, it's like one of those advantages that we have is knowing how to describe style. And that's why I think a lot of people who try these programs out feel like, oh my God, this is super scary because I'm just describing exactly what I want and I'm getting these crazy results. But the thing is, we're already innately better at doing that. We have that background already to know different aspects of art history, different styles, different aesthetics. Our entire career in the film industry is using words to describe the intangible, figuring out how to take this kernel of an idea and inspire people and get them to be able to execute on that vision. Because of that skill and because of that process that we've ingrained in ourselves, that's why we're better at using AI. I work with some amazing and talented developers, and I will, like, one of them is in the audience here. And every once in a while, I will come up with a prompt or a solution, and he will just come up to me and be like, how did you think about that? And my answer is usually like, I just already knew from these other projects I did way before I came into tech. We have these skills that are innate, that feel easy to us, and that's what makes us the best people to drive AI. But you have to be willing to adapt and change your process. My sort of grand prediction is we are, especially with the strikes, with everything that's going on, the workflow of making a film, of making video content is going to change very drastically over the next decade. Departments are gonna blur. That's where I got that ideation, execution, that model from, because sticking with the old ways just because that's the way we've done it is just a guaranteed way to make yourself irrelevant, for lack of a better word. That's how you get to a stage where you're replaced by the people who are younger and hungrier than you are. And as an industry, like, we have all these structures built around that: pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, that mindset. But like, we're seeing this blend between content and between gaming and interactive content. And so there's a lot that we in the film industry can take from game development and the way they work, which is literally like, you start out with your idea, you use placeholders, you refine it again and again and again over time until finally you reach a level of polish that is acceptable to you, and that's when you go into distribution. And that's what I mean with this right here. These all line up kind of with how we do things right now, but it's really like, in game development, you go back and forth between these two steps over and over again until you reach a level of quality that is acceptable. And a lot of games kind of skip from this to this, and then their fans get angry, and all of a sudden you see videos of their game glitching out all over the place. That's common. But going through these steps, and like, we're already seeing like the DLCification of video content as well. Like, Disney Plus is notorious for updating their VFX, their workflows and everything after the fact. After the content has already been released, they will go back and keep making continual tweaks and changes. And I don't think that's gonna stop. I don't think that's going to end. I think that's going to pick up more and more. And so, you know, it is a bit scary. Like, we had this era where like having physical media was a way to preserve like the version of the thing that you're watching. that is going away. Like now we're even seeing companies sell blank Blu-ray cases with codes to download the content or codes to have access to the digital copy. So physical media is like, in a sense, going away as well. If you want to see where video content is going, look at where images are today. So we have these pretty amazing technologies. The first one I want to talk about is called ControlNet. And what ControlNet does is it really brings the artistry back into generative AI. Because what you can do is record a piece of content, take an image, use something that you are creating as the inspiration to then add these effects on top of. One of the workflows that I've been exploring is actually taking a piece of content, doing just the roughest comps, like my first experiment in After Effects level of quality comps of adding some effects in, and then you run ControlNet and Stable Diffusion on top of that content, and all of a sudden you get a much more polished final product. These examples right here are a piece of tech called Animate Diff. And what that's doing is, in this whole process, it's adding another specified model called, which is trained specifically on the difference between frames. So it's trained on like how animations and video and content, like the motion blur, is implemented. And it's basically you generate a sequence and then you run that additional model on top of it as a refiner. And all of a sudden you're getting way better results without any interpolating, without any, these are GIFs, these are just image sequences. And we're getting like this level of quality already. Now, once I add like interpolation through like DaVinci or Nuke on top of this footage, all of a sudden you're getting way smoother results. And this is all open source. Like you can do this today using very easy to use like Python notebooks. This is available to the public. Like, this is not being gatekept by like Adobe. You don't have to pay a monthly subscription fee. There are services out there like Runway, which are charging you for like, based on the seconds you're generating. I would say those are great to play around with to see what's possible and to dip your toes. But like, if you're really starting your own project and you're bootstrapping something today, I would start and end in the open source community, because that's where you're going to get the control that you need. That's where you're going to be able to lock in your models. That's where you can train specified versions of what you're doing. That really is the best way to go today, because majority of the companies out there really are just, they're taken from the open source community too. A lot of the most popular AI startups, if you trace their roots, like you will find the open source project that they started from. 11 Labs for voice, probably like the best quality voice generation software there is. They started from a project called Turtle TTS. Midjourney, like the biggest image generation or the highest quality image generation that you can buy today, is a forked model of Stable Diffusion. They did one extra step, which makes Midjourney really good. They added something called RLHF, which is reinforcement learning through human feedback. But the base model is still Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion just released a model called SDXL. Now you can pay for that access, or you could download it yourself and run it on a relatively powerful gaming PC, but the models are getting optimized to where you could run it off your laptop pretty soon. Yeah. This is the project I'm working on, Virtual Producer. You know, when I made my feature film, one of the most annoying things is there were 4 days where our AD was not able to be on set because of a prior commitment, and those 4 days were absolute hell, like some of the worst days I've had. You know, I make a lot of jokes about how on my feature film, a lot of the best days of my life and 4 of the worst days of my life happened. And that's where the impetus for this idea came. It's basically taking unstructured data, running it through a generative model, and then getting structured data out. So a lot of times, like the assistant director is just answering simple questions, but like to answer that question, you have to break your train of thought in order to get that. So for those type of questions, if you're on a small set, you can ask Virtual Producer. One of the most annoying parts of making a film is having to make call sheets and deal with last-minute schedule changes and things like that. That's what I'm trying to fix. And so, yeah, this is Bootstrapping Creativity. I know this was a bit all over the place, but if you guys have specific questions about techniques, models, where to look, what to do, I'm willing to answer those. Open source means it's like open license. It the main cost that you might run into is if you don't have a powerful enough computer yourself, then you might have to pay for like cloud compute space, but the code itself, the models, those are all free. Yeah, Stable Diffusion, like you don't need to pay, like if you've got a relatively powerful gaming PC, you can start generating those images right away. You can run it on lower end hardware and you can also run it on Macs, but those are using like different forks of the models, which are also open source, but because of that forking process, there's a loss of quality during that process. But Stable Diffusion, like, yeah, you can run that for free.
All right. If you have any more questions for Pratik, do you mind taking them outside? Is that cool?
That's
All
fine.
right, great. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation.